Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be always acceptable in thy sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. I spent my time right after ordination as one of the very few professional jail chaplains in Santa Clara County. I'd done some of my pastoral care training there and was surprised to be offered the job. My boss, Dave Robinson, ordained in the American Baptist Church, was very particular about his chaplains, and for very good reasons. You might expect that they'd be only too glad to have any applicants for the job, but Dave's reasoning was based on the fact that chaplains can do far more harm than good in the jails. Even volunteers have to undergo training to help them approach those they meet with more compassion and less judgment, more listening and less preaching. You see, among the roles chaplains have is to represent God's caring and attentive ears in a place where the stories one hears range from the very sad to the astonishingly terrible. As Dave liked to explain it, each day was a personal journey for each of us, right up to the edge of our own psychological abyss. There we needed to peer over the edge and remember that moment, then retreat and regroup. He was right, too. But lest anyone think that the stories we heard were mere embellishments for our benefit, told to prove an inmate's innocence, let me say this. In all my time as a chaplain, I heard countless personal stories, often about a person's life, their family, and yes, their crimes. Only twice did an inmate tell me that they were innocent. Twice. And in both cases, DNA evidence finally proved that they were innocent. That's right, 2 for 2. While there were a number of truly evil people among the jail population, there seemed to be an unspoken rule that you shouldn't lie to or try to physically harm a chaplain. And though we never took that for granted, it was something that gave us chaplains a measure of comfort. Working there also gave me a chance to experience how our laws and our legal system affected the lives of those caught up in them. My time working in the jails covered the time during which the 3 strikes judgments were being handed down. That is, conviction on 3 felonies, and you were imprisoned for life. That law was passed as a deterrent to anyone who might think that relatively short prison stays were just the cost of their criminal lifestyle. In fact, the statistics showed that this changed nothing but the number of prisoners with life sentences. And thus, part of the chaplain's job then was also dealing with lives that were being ended by prison, suicide, or violence. But here I need to also offer you one more little insight passed along by Dave Robinson, and actually others as well. If you go somewhere crowded, a mall full of people, a sporting event, a concert, and look around, somewhere between 10% and 25% of the folks you're rubbing elbows with have a police record. That is, they likely spent at least some time in jail somewhere. A sobering fact on a Sunday where the gospel reading is all about the laws and we try to understand who really are our neighbors. And yes, this brings me to today's gospel, but I'm going to come at it from a different angle. The narrative we heard today may indeed have been something that Jesus was using as part of his message, but he apparently was not alone. There's another version of this that comes from other Hebrew sources right around Jesus' own time. It's about a rabbi named Hillel. Now, Rabbi Hillel, so the story goes, did not come from the more normal, well-to-do traditional families that his clergy contemporaries did. No, he attended teachings and lectures by occupying a place on the roof of the school, in both good weather and bad. So you might say that he came to his profession with what was probably a different point of view than his colleagues. Nevertheless, he became well known for his insight, caring, and keen intellect. And these things saved his life. You see, they say, one day he was traveling alone on a road, much like that from Jerusalem to Jericho, in a place frequented by robbers who did not usually leave witnesses to their deeds. Well, as it turns out, some robbers stopped Rabbi Hillel, and after taking what little he had, were preparing to kill him, when one recognized him and decided first to have a little bit of fun. The robber offered that they would spare his life if he could recite all of the Hebrew laws, and there are over 600 of them, while jumping up and down. Rabbi Hillel obliged, saying, "You will love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength, and your neighbor as yourself." Then he stopped jumping. The robber protested, but the rabbi shrugged and said, "The rest is just commentary." They let him go, astonished at his answer. Whether we are hearing this story possibly as reinterpreted by Jesus or included in Luke's gospel as Jesus' own insight, it is nevertheless there because it's a curiously important insight into not merely Jewish law or temple law or Roman law, but an entirely different kind of law altogether. In my own limited experience, and I say limited because I'm not a lawyer or any sort of legal scholar, I have observed that, generally speaking, there are three kinds of laws we humans must learn to deal with. The first is the kind that most of us are familiar with, laws that are designed, one way or another, to protect us from the things that we might do to one another. Laws that control and penalize the harm of human actions. The Ten Commandments fit into this category, though in a peculiar way. You see, although Moses told the Israelites that these came directly from God, they are almost comically rudimentary. I mean, if you need to tell people, for example, not to kill or steal or lie, you're dealing with people that left Egypt bringing everything they could carry, but no social laws. These commandments are not offering the Israelites a social order, but attempting to lift them up out of complete lawlessness, not starting from square one, but square zero. Most of the laws on the books today deal, in one way or another, with the prevention of some kind of human lawlessness. In other words, they serve as societal protection. The second kind of law I observe is the kind of law that is used for division, to somehow divide us by using fear and hate to promote an us versus them view of the world. Such laws are older than the Bible, to be sure. I think that many were formed when a group or even a nation required some measure of unique identity. That is, they are used to unify one group by excluding others. The Israelites wandering in the wilderness with Moses gained a sense of identity through the laws Moses gave them. Laws told them, as God's chosen people, what to eat, what to wear, what was clean or unclean, how to be reconciled with one another and their God. But they also told them whom to hate and fear, whom to kill, and even how, and how vengeful God would be if they did not follow these laws. Their ultimate entry into the promised land was, according to the biblical accounts, a bloodbath. This is definitely not unique. Humankind has used laws of division over and over again throughout history. Think of slavery, the treatment of Native Americans, the incarceration of Japanese Americans in World War II, segregation, what's happening today on our southern border. We tend to look to other places for examples, but we don't have to. Today, even we live in a nation that uses division, legalized by decrees of fear and hatred, as a weapon against its own people, and we must struggle to deal with this. A third kind of law stands in stark contrast to the two other kinds, and probably most especially in contrast to the laws that legalize division. This third kind represents the laws that are meant to unite us all. These are things that may not be seen as law, that is, legislated, codified, and adjudicated in the courts, that is, laws made to deal only upon a defined group of people. City laws, for example, are enforced within the city limits, but they don't unite all the people within the city in any meaningful way with everyone else. Generally, the laws that unite us are the ones that we like to cite as being God's commandments, since, well, how are you going to argue with God about this stuff? But the problem is that what might be mandated by God can also be corrupted by humankind to oppress one another in God's name using self-appointed authority. In other words, these laws that unite us are the most fragile, the most easily abused and corrupted, and require our greatest effort to understand and live up to them. No court can protect them. We must. The lawyer asks Jesus, then, what must he do to inherit eternal life? When Jesus presses back, the lawyer cites what we now call the Great Commandments. Here are commandments that say nothing about religion, nationality, race, gender, social wealth, or status. Neither do they mention the temple, the courts, the prisons, or human judges. But the fellow is a lawyer, and he's looking for a weakness that might be exploited. He asks, who is my neighbor? Jesus tells the story of the Samaritan, someone whom the Jews either look down upon or flat out despise. Even a Samaritan is your neighbor. And if even he can be your neighbor, there can be no limits. It's either no one or everyone. And God says, everyone. The love we are commanded to have for God is, by any measure, all-consuming. That is, it is to be such that there is no room for any loopholes or excuses. And it must extend in just that same way to our neighbors. It is the law of ultimate unification. A law that transcends so much else of what we encounter in life that it can only work as an act of faith. That is, an act done because of our belief in the unbelievable. That is, after all, what faith is. There are probably many laws that can unify us, but they all have the same goal, and they all require the same attention and care on our part. It is our souls and our consciences that must enforce such laws, and we return to places such as this to try to remember that goal before going back to lives where other kinds of laws tempt us to forget it all. I sincerely believe that there is no greater task given to us by our Creator than seeking in whatever ways we can to live up to these great commandments. I can only leave you with that thought. The rest is up to all of us. Amen.